Welcome to Work Like a Human, a podcast from Go Innovation. Think with me for a moment about the difference between process and results. A lot of times when people say they want something, what they're referring to is the outcome, the results. James Clear makes this point in his book, Atomic Habits. But the reality is, to get that outcome, you can often reverse engineer that and say, okay, well, we need to have certain habits, in James Clear's words, or just in general terms, we need to have processes in place that help us get to that outcome. In other words, if you put certain processes in place and then achieve incremental growth and consistency over time, you make it much more likely that that outcome will actually be achieved. But it's a lot easier for a lot of us to love the outcome, to love the results, rather than loving the process. Ironically, if you love the process, you make the results a lot more likely. I'm not a process-oriented person. I tend to be more of a starter than a finisher. And my guest today is Brandi Nicole with Be the Light Enterprises. And in the conversation you'll hear, she admits that she feels that too, but she's built a consulting practice around helping small businesses and entrepreneurs figure out what processes they need to have in place, getting their house in order, so that the results they say they want are more likely to be achieved. When I do executive coaching or life coaching with people, there's two equal and opposite errors that I see people make. On the one hand, people become enamored with an outcome and they fail to think through, well, what are the things I should actually put in place over time to achieve that outcome? And often those things have nothing to do with what makes that outcome so attractive, which can be difficult. As an example, my wife and I are very amateur gardeners. And what we're realizing is we love the result. Like, we love eating fresh produce, but there is a lot that goes into getting it there, way more than just tilling and planting. I mean, there's all kinds of like, how do you water and when do you water and what equipment do you need and how do you feed different things, and maybe you need to get the soil tested. And I'm discovering that I'm much less enthusiastic about all of those different processes than I am about the results. I'm also discovering that when you care about the process, you make the results more likely. So as a coach, I see people care too much about the results and not enough about the process. I also see the flip side. So if you find yourself as someone who's constantly very busy, it's worth stepping back and thinking about, is my busyness actually taking me toward a result that I have defined and intentionally chosen? It's easy to fill our time with meaningless productivity. Ideally, the results you're looking for, the outcomes you're hoping to achieve, and the processes or the habits that you have in place, again, personally or professionally, ideally those things have a symbiotic relationship where you have clear vision, why you want to do what you do, and you have a clear how. And the clarity of your vision informs your persistence in the how, and getting excellent about your execution helps to inform the likelihood that your vision will come to pass. Ideally, again, these things work in a symbiotic relationship. With all of that in mind, let's turn now to my conversation with my friend Brandi. Hi, Brandi. Thank you so much for being willing to spend some time talking with me today.
Hey, Rory. Thank you for having me.
There's a theme that I see you talk about a lot, which is that people need to focus on process. So don't think so much about results. Think a little bit more about process. Why is that important?
So I think that sometimes when we set out to achieve a particular goal, if you're anything like me and your goals are big, hairy, and audacious, they can seem very out there, very with not so much within reach. Mm-hmm. But if I focus on the things that I do day in and day out, to develop myself first as a person, just in terms of my habits, and then also create those repeatable steps that will free up some space just for my brain and creativity, and then even position me to be able to scale at some point, then inevitably I'll get to where it is that I'm going. It's interesting that I even find myself in this lane or path of working with people with their startup processes, or to create client intake processes or team communication processes. Like me and processes, like if you know me as an individual, you like, how does that even go together? Just because historically I'm a pretty, whimsical person, just kind of like fly by the seat of my pants. But flying by the seat of my pants can be stressful at times, and having to think about things and come up with new things all the time can take more time and energy than you need to spend, and it can be placed elsewhere. So sometimes people will resist adding or improving a process because they're like, oh, I just go with the flow. I just do me,
Yeah.
And doing you sometimes will end up costing you. And so it's just about increasing efficiency and effectiveness.
Yeah. So it's like if you're constantly having to think through and choose from like a bunch of different options of what you're going to do, in one sense, that's very freeing, but that freedom comes at a pretty high cost. And what I'm hearing you say, it's a cost of efficiency, a cost of time. And especially if you're like a small business owner, entrepreneur, that currency is expensive. Like you don't get that back. And setting up those systems is going to set you up so that your business can work for you and not the other way around.
Absolutely. So I focus on women, I focus on nonprofit leaders, and I focus on ministry leaders. And my mission is to leave you with increased peace of mind, productivity, and profitability.
Peace of mind, productivity, and profitability. Okay. And so what does it typically look like for you to start working with somebody like that?
I'll just use a current client. So recently I've been working with someone who is almost 2 years into her business. It grew really fast. She had like some really great PR in the very beginning before things were even set in motion. And so it has caused her to just kind of have to sit things out as they come up. But one of the things is her reach is growing and people are interested in working with her is that there are no repeatable steps. Having to coach people through the fact that, okay, you're almost 2 years old, but we need to think about this now based upon where you're going. And so whether maybe you don't have a full team right now, but maybe you're going to hire someone from Upworks. But you still need to be thinking about all the roles that need to be filled. I don't need you to think about what you have the capacity to do. I need us to think about where we're going. And can you pass this off to someone and it be easily understood and they not have to ask you a bunch of questions? So I think I do a very good job of someone who is working with people who are visionaries. I'm a visionary, so I know for myself. So a visionary doesn't really want to have to think about details. They shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
And so then it's my role to come in and say, let me take these things away from you. Let me ask you the right questions so that we can get this stuff documented. So I'm just really big on the documentation. But so for someone in her case who is like in that 0 to 3 years stage of business, then it's really like, let's focus on what your vision is and let's focus on who you expect to need so that we can start putting ideal processes in place as opposed to, what to be true, because processes are living and breathing, so they can always be improved upon.
So I'm curious, what are the things that you see that typically get in the way of people being willing to sit down and figure out and then implement these kinds of processes?
Well, we live in a time that is very outward focused, right? And that's even as individuals. So one thing about me is that even as I create content and even just who I show up as on social media, I believe it's important to be very holistic in our presentation. So not just concerned about the outside, which we have that, right? Where, everybody is an Instagram model and, people want to thirst trap and put their sexy pictures up, because they want to be seen and they want attention, and all these things. But what's really happening on the inside? And so it's the same thing for a business. Yeah, you have these great graphics, you have this branding, if you will, because everything is about social media and branding, everything, and so you have this program that went over and so many people came and they paid this amount and such was there, and none of that equals sustainability. So then, then you grow and you have this presence, but then what's the plan for long-term sustainability? So one is people are focused on what it looks like externally. And then also people don't prioritize, right? So then they want to do all the things instead of focusing on 2 or 3 things. So my whole point was, we were talking about focus. How to get focused. That's one of the things that I see is a hindrance to people making time to create the processes, because they're not focused. They want to do all the things. And so I was saying, just for example, like a Michael Hyatt will tell you to do a big 3. And I have found that I can only do a big 2.
It's so funny. Like, we've been having this conversation and we've been having internet problems. And I feel like it's one of those things that in normal life, it's kind of a minor frustration, but everything is on Zoom right now. And so it's like, it adds on top of that layer of frustration that's already there. What have you been learning maybe about yourself as a person, as a woman, as a businesswoman, in the midst of all the pandemic that's been happening?
I've learned that I do too much. Like, team do too much. Like, that's me. Like, so because I came into a pandemic like, I'm about to get all these things done. I have so much to do. This is the time. And I do believe that this is the time, but it looks different. It looks different. It feels different. So I think I came into this more so treating it as if, oh, I'm at home, so now I have all the time to do all these other things. Yeah. And after about 5 weeks of doing all the things and other things, after I just told you to only focus on 2, I completely hit a wall, because it's like, there's work stuff, and then I do some part-time work for a nonprofit, and then I lead a ministry project, and then I just got a certificate in women's entrepreneurship from Cornell University. So I was doing that. Thank you. So I was doing that. So I'm not making it happen in the pandemic. But anyway, 5 weeks in, that was old. And I had to really pause and be okay with sleeping in or being in the bed the whole day on a Saturday. Things that are really okay to do right now. And so looked up and I hadn't set boundaries for myself in terms of just because you're home and just because you're single, meaning I don't have nobody, I don't have other people to consider. So then what are the things and I don't have a social agenda anymore. So then what are the things that are giving me boundaries? To not do work all the time. And so I reached burnout about 5 weeks into this. I would say over the past couple weeks, I just slowed down and gave myself permission to. I started to be vulnerable with some women entrepreneurship friends of mine who we actually have a call with them when I get off with you. So having that in place as a form of support. Also just, friends. I'm in Nashville, but my family and close friends are in Chicago. So even reaching out to some friends to say hey, I need some extra support during this time. And then, binge watching stuff on Netflix and Hulu that everybody else is doing.
Yep.
And eating, which means I need a workout routine. So, because I'm not trying to come out the pandemic big.
I mean, it's I feel like that we set up daily rhythms for ourselves, and that's a form of a process, right? There's some things we know we're going to do, and so we don't have to think about it. And in a crisis, even the best laid processes get questioned, they get thrown off. And I think, you have a choice. You can look at that as a judgment on yourself, or you can look at that as new data. It's okay, this is helpful in a situation that I've never encountered before. These are the things that have to give, and this is what it's going to look like. Yeah,
so this past week, I'm okay. And because I spoke about, setting boundaries. What are going to be the things that cause me to set the boundaries? So movement, so whether that's a walk, whether that's joining a couple ladies I know on Zoom for yoga, whether that's my YouTube workout, Then there's creativity, because I'm actually pretty crafty. Actually, all this you see in the background, I did this during the pandemic, because I had been wanting to create like a little space for when I do videos. And what else? Cooking, cleaning. Not like cleaning, because I don't do baseboards, but, cleaning out drawers and stuff like that.
Imagine that I came to you and I was like, I'm really intrigued by the idea of getting better processes in place. If someone's listening or watching this and they're like, I like that idea, what's the one place I should start? What advice would you give?
I believe that it's important to start with your personal why, right? Like, so before we get to, I need these processes, I really want to have an understanding of why you do what you do.
Yeah.
Because that's going to translate into how you do business and why you're doing business. So just say, like, for me, since I was very small, I have always been very concerned about who I'm going to be in life. Like, I didn't grow up knowing what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I just knew that I had this thing about being. And so for me, I was always on this search for purpose. And so that's why my professional path has not been so linear, because I've been on this like hunt for purpose, not for a position or just particular field. After going through so many trials and just kind of being aimless for so many years before discovering my purpose, that really began to burden me, and I began to want that for others. And so then I do believe that my purpose in life is to help others discover theirs. So one of the greatest ways that I believe you can live out your purpose is through entrepreneurship. Not the only way, but it's, one of my favorites. And so then that leads into why I do what I do in business. One person's business can funnel the purpose of so many other people. And then now we can have a conversation of like, because, as my business begins to scale, I don't want people to come to be the like enterprises to just fill a seat or to fill a role for me. I want them to be able to identify an aspect of their purpose within my organization, as well as out in the world. And like, how can we help you do that? And so then I have that conversation with people that I work with, because then that impacts the type of processes you create, the type of culture that you're creating. Like, what is it that you're inviting people into? So I think that's what sets me apart from other people who may do similar work, is because I'm always going to want to know, why do you do what you do? Obviously in marketing and things like that, Simon Sinek, have you watched his TED Talk before?
Yeah.
And so, he talks about, people buy why you do what you do, not what or how. And so I really stick to that for my life and now for business. And I really do my best to bring that to the forefront for other people. I like to say that I help people achieve their mission from the inside out. So if I can help you understand that your mission is not just the outward facing things that takes place in your business, like all this great programming and awards and all these things, but you raggedy on the inside, that doesn't support your mission. So before I even work with someone, we need to audit the business in several key areas, like your mission, your strategic planning, your client services, finances, how do you measure impact, things like that.
Yeah. I think what I hear you saying is there should be some seasons, like every so often you need to step back, audit your business. I feel like the things that you're saying are applicable to life. Like, I'm thinking about, like, when is the last time I sat back and audited my life and like really took stock of vision. I've coached people before of, they'll come to me and they'll say, I want to get a daily schedule in place. And what they're really saying, to use your language, is I need a better process for how I spend my time and how I decide what's worth my time. And I always say, well, we need to start with your vision first, because you're going to set the wrong goals if you don't do that, and you're going to expend a lot of effort doing something that's not really worth your time.
Well, that goes back to what I mentioned about the personal why and really getting to the root of what you're here on this earth to do, because that informs what I say yes and no to. I don't struggle saying yes or no about anything. Like, I'm very clear. Like, I'm very clear. Like, it's not about, oh, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings, or they did this for me, so I should do that for them. Like, that has nothing to do with it. Like, they chose it because they chose it, and I'm choosing to not do something or to do something. And it shouldn't have to be for any other reason. Like, does this align with what I'm overall committed to? And if it is, then I can say yes. And, there are those instances where maybe something actually does, but it may not be the right time. And so you just have to it requires some self-awareness, to be honest.
Yeah. I really, really like that. Process is basically a way of protecting what matters most. And the way that protection happens is it sets guardrails around your yes and your no. So process is what allows you to set and maintain those boundaries.
I said purpose. Purpose allows for that.
Got it. Yes. So
but
purpose.
Processes could too. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So that's a really important distinction. In other words, so it's important because I think actually some people do think maybe if I can put a habit in place or this process in place, it's going to take me where I want to go. And I think your point is you have to start a level higher first. Like, you've got to start with purpose and why that matters. And that's the thing that's really going to fuel your boundaries. And then whatever structures or processes you put in place, they should flow from that in an obvious and connected way. Yeah. So, Brandi, as we start winding down this conversation, I like to ask people, the name of the podcast is Work Like a Human. And so I'm looking for stories about what makes us more human in life and work. So I'm curious for you, whether for your personal life or thinking about the people that you work with, what does it look like to be more human in life and in work?
Have we spoken about an organization called Landmark Worldwide?
I don't think so.
One of the greatest things that I have taken away from some of the courses that I've completed with them is like what my listening is of others. Like, not listening to respond, but actually like listening so that I can hear what it is that someone is saying. People want to be seen and want to be heard. And if you're really listening, sometimes you can even hear what people are not saying. Yeah.
Sometimes you can hear what people are not saying. That's a really important and deep part of listening, is being able to listen between the lines. And I think at the very beginning you said how to be over there with other people, which is like just poignant to me right now, because I think we all actually want to be over there with other people physically right now. And the irony is there's so many times where even when we're working shoulder to shoulder with people, we're not really over there with them because we're not listening. So I really like that answer of what does it mean to live and work more like a human, is to listen in such a way that you're actually over there with other people. Thank you for sharing that. Brandi, I really appreciate you. I appreciate that you took this time. I love that you help people to focus on a clearer process. And so I wish you the best as you continue wrestling with the implications of all this for you personally and for your business. And for anybody listening, we obviously wish that for you as well. But Brandi, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you, Rory.
As we finish up this episode of Work Like a Human, I want to draw your mind back to a couple things that Brandi said. First, she talked about starting with your why. And so I'd ask you to consider, how clear are you on not what you do or how you do it, but why you do what you do, whether in your personal life or in your professional life. The next thread I want to draw out is this idea that the processes and the habits that we put in place, again, personally and professionally, those things should serve to advance our vision. Those things should be what influence our yes and our no. In other words, our boundaries. Perhaps you could think on a couple of things. First, again, am I clear on why I do what I do? What can I do to spend time in self-reflection to get a clear sense of what are the values that drive me? What's my mission? Things like that. And then secondly, consider that why, and then look at how you spend your time. Is there alignment there? Are you spending your time on things that truly further your vision? Or do you find your day crowded with busy work that doesn't actually serve to move you where you want to go? Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you next time on Work Like a Human.